If an important part wears out on your lawnmower, you're going to replace that part, right? That might be the case if your mower was worth a lot of money because you use it commercially. And even though this lawnmower might look to be in good condition, it's only because we gave it a really good cleaning. But what happens if your mower is really old and run down like this one is? Well, you're about to see what happens, and it's not what you would expect. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at this newer style snapper lawnmower. And the problem is that it takes multiple pulls to start it, and that's despite us already having worked on it in the last video. However, we haven't gone through the entire fuel system yet, so that's what we plan on doing for today. We're also going to be dealing with these racing slicks on the front drive wheels. Now, I know a lot of viewers don't like front wheel drive because of poor traction, so it'll be very important to get some tread back on them. Some of you might already know what I plan on doing, but for the rest, it'll be kind of interesting to see. So after looking at all the stickers I can find on this engine and mower, it was apparently made in 2018, which isn't terrible. However, I don't think this mower was getting the maintenance it should have in the last several years of its life. Next, we'll drain the fuel tank of any gasoline and then start the engine and let it run until it stops. That way, we won't have to worry about making a mess when we take the carb apart to inspect it. So it turns out there's a lot of debris in the gasoline, and I hate to say it, but it won't be the last time we see it either. So as you just saw, it took 3 pulls to start this engine, which I know doesn't sound like much, but I do think it's worth it to try and get it down to 2, if not 1 single soft and lazy pull. So what's the big plan with the tires then? Simple, we'll be rotating the tires from the rear wheels onto the front wheels. So if I turn the front wheels over, you can see the gearing for the drive system. That's the reason why you can't just swap the wheels around. Yes, I am aware that I'm skipping over the part where I struggled to remove the tires from the wheels. Just to let you know, this is not easy to do, but the cost savings makes it worth doing. And after about 10 minutes of struggling, the front drive wheels now have tread again, while the non-driven wheels are smooth, which isn't that big of a deal. So it really depends on which vendor you choose to buy these wheels from, but you could be saving almost $30 for the pair using this method. That may not sound like a lot of money to you, but when compared to the value of the mower, it's a lot of money you're saving. So we are going to take a look at the entire fuel system, but I'd like to take a good look inside the fuel tank first. Considering how terrible this mower looked when we first got it, I'd be very concerned about debris inside the fuel tank. Now if you really wanted to, you could take the fuel tank off separately from the carb, however it's just easier to take them off at the same time. Now there are a couple of items you need to watch out for, such as breaking the plastic when disconnecting the choke bypass. And you'll also have to watch out for the O-ring and its retainer on the intake pipe because sometimes it comes off the back of the carb. Now these 2 pieces are critical to sealing the carb to the intake system, so don't overlook them. So with the carb disconnected from the fuel tank, we can now get a better look inside it, and what we find is not good. I know it's tough to tell, but what you're seeing is organic debris that's collected from years of refueling. This will need to be cleaned out, otherwise some of that material is going to end up somewhere where you don't want it to be. Next, we'll take off the screws holding the fuel bowl to the carb. Once they've been removed, carefully pry the bowl free from the carb, otherwise you could damage all that wonderful plastic. It's really surprising that there's still this much fuel in the bowl considering we ran it until the engine stopped. Now the bowl doesn't look that bad, however it only gets worse from here on. Now the main fuel jet does look good, however there could be buildup in the opening that's restricting fuel flow. But there is more to look at than just the main jet, and for that we'll need to take out the cartridge. Once it is out, we'll separate it to inspect these smaller openings, and this is when we see more of that debris on the emulsion tube. We'll of course need to clean up all this debris and also make sure these smaller openings are clear as well. It's probably a wise idea to remove the float and needle to see how clean the rest of the carb is. And it's a really good thing that we did because, as you can tell, there's more of that organic debris all over it. Now because there's quite a lot of cleaning to do, I'm going to break out the ultrasonic cleaner for this one. Let me be the first to tell you that you do not need one of these cleaners. It is really handy to have one of these around, but cleaning these parts by hand has worked great for a really long time. So I did run them through the ultrasonic twice, one with a cleaning solution and the second time with just clean water. And as you can tell, these parts are extremely clean and ready to be put back together. This kind of work is not for everybody, and if you feel like you're not ready to put that much work into getting it cleaned up only for it not to work out, I would then recommend that you replace your carb instead with either a cheap aftermarket part or a very expensive factory part. I know it doesn't look all that difficult to clean one of these carbs, however, there are a couple of detailed parts that could cause problems if you don't do it right. Now there is a silver lining to this problem, and that is most of these carbs are less than 16 bucks, which makes buying one of these carbs a sensible option when compared to other choices. So if you didn't know it, there's also a drain at the bottom of the carb to help drain out the last bit of fuel in the carb before storing it. But it is kind of worthless though, because there's typically not enough room to get an Allen wrench to fit there. Also, do not forget to install the O-ring and its retainer, otherwise the engine might not start and run the way it should. Once the carb is back together, we can finally install the fuel line and the fuel tank and then put them back onto the engine. This would also be a great time to install an additional fuel filter, however the fuel line is incredibly short, which makes installing one really tough to do. Now this carb has a thermostat to bypass the choke when the engine is hot. Just make sure that you install the arm for it in the correct orientation, otherwise it's not going to work. Also, be sure the arm snaps into place, then check its operation to be sure it's right. So I have seen mowers thrown out onto the curb before because someone installed the arm incorrectly. It was quite unfortunate for them, but very fortunate for me and my wallet. Just remember when installing the base for the air filter, make sure to connect up the emissions breather hose, otherwise your engine will be breathing in unfiltered air. After securing the filter base, there's only a few items left to check off before we see if the engine will start up better than before. So here's some advice, and that is only add a couple of ounces of fuel to the tank first. Since we had to open the carb, there's a good chance that it could start leaking, but if it does, you don't want to make it worse by having a full tank. But luckily for us, it's not leaking, so I'll continue by installing the old air filter. Now don't worry, I'll change this out right before I sell it. Now the reason I do it that way is because I have changed them out early before, only to have gotten them dirty from having to do extra work to the carb. And if the buyer happens to check the air filter, they'll see it's perfectly clean. And the very last item is of course the engine oil. Just make sure not to overfill it. But if you do add just a bit too much oil, just tip the mower over enough to get a couple of ounces out. So instead of needing 3 pulls to start it, this time it only took 1 pull, which is a huge improvement. I also didn't have to pull it with a lot of force, which will make a lot of buyers happy as well. You shouldn't have to strain yourself making a full pull to start one of these engines. And with our tire rotation putting tread back onto the drive wheels, most buyers will understand why the non-driven wheels are the ones that are bald now. And with that last bit of work done to this mower, I think it's finally time to put it up for sale. So my question is pretty simple. Would you have bought brand new drive wheels, or would you have done what I did and just rotated the tires instead? Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.